electrons to 99.9999 some odd percent, and they go quite fast. You study molecular reactions using X-rays to probe the molecular structure as it evolves. And you can do it with electrons, but not in this case. We're happy to do it with the X-rays. So let me find my mouse again. How do we create those X-rays? Well, these electrons are now, right about in this phase, after they boosted up their energies, after being kind of rolled down this hill like a marble, these electrons are going super duper fast. Now they enter what's called an undulator. These are magnetic poles, these are magnets sitting north and south, one another, separated by a few millimeters, and as the electrons zoom through this undulator, these alternating magnetic fields, they begin to wiggle. And when they wiggle, the electrons give off X-rays, each kind of round trip. And as these X-rays burn off, they interact with one another, and the electron and the X-rays pile together in sheets, they bunch together, boosting the X-ray energy every time we do a round trip or oscillation. So now we have a whole pocket of X-rays and electrons together. Again, we don't want to use the electrons, we want to use the X-rays. So we have these two big, super duper powerful magnets. You do not want to stand next to them. Credit cards will be erased. They're really dangerous. But we discard those electrons to effectively a large piece of lead in the ground. You just burn them off. And the X-rays have no polarity, no polarity, so they don't see that field, so they just go right through it. And then these exit off to the experimental end stations where we perform science. And the big magnets, they just build away. The electrons go to rest. Not a lot of charge there, but we couldn't harvest that electronic energy. It comes too short. There's not enough charge. So why LCOS? So if you go to the LCOS website, just on any one of the SWAC websites here, especially the SWAC website, and it's conveniently called YLCOS. And so it's why we're going to build this great facility, and this is what avenues, what can we open up, and the type of science that we can look into. Well, on this website, it shows, these are recently results in very great high publication, high visibility journals in Nature and physical chemistry letters and physical review letters in Science. The other one's kind of heard of these type of publications. And so here we're actually looking at a structural change of watching when something in your brain is firing and telling something to move, or telling something to, like an enzyme firing or synapse across your nerves. You can actually watch the structural change, and it's as you can basically feel the synapse firing your pardon me. It's as your nerves fire across the synapse, you can watch the structural change of how you're actually feeling. Or you can look at live things in situ. You can look at as viruses, proteins, peptides be intersected by this ultra-bright X-ray source, and in the blink of an eye, that X-ray source takes a picture of it before it's completely destroyed. It's eradicated. It goes away. In this case, the last public lecture was actually given by a colleague of mine, who was a postdoc here in the Science Institute, by the name of Jerry LaRue. And in this type of study, instead of watching the chemical bond break, in which we were watching here and filming a molecular movie, they actually watched one form on the surface of ruthenium. So they watched the CO molecule form on a ruthenium surface, something very similar that goes on inside your car when you drove over here. But last but not least, what really makes me excited, and why we're here tonight, is this last bit of line was on, if you go to the website, there's a study of molecular motion in response to light and other chemical triggers, and to compile a movie of these changes. So I'm glad to say that we actually can do that now. And so we're watching this, and this is our paper that we just came out in just earlier this year. And so, how do we do this? First, as Michael said, there was a very large hype when this facility was first being built, of like, how can we make a molecular movie? We wanted to use this ultra-bright X-ray source to take snapshots and photographs of molecules in action and chemical reactions as they occur. All the way, so when we find ourselves in 2015, over 10 years ago was the first mention of molecular movies. Doing one of the talks, a really good talk by Phil Buxbaum, by the professor here at Stanford and SWAC. And we're talking about how molecular movies, so you can kind of see, even, like I said, 9 to 10 years ago, it's the hype. There was a molecular movie public lecture. I was saying this is making a molecular movie. It was a great talk by Kelly Gaffney, another professor here, and showing the importance of why we're here tonight, to see what we're going to see tonight. And a lot of friends and colleagues and gave these talks. And to remember, we only delivered our first X-rays only 6 years ago. So even long before that first delivery of these ultra-bright X-rays, were there mention of molecular movies. So if you guys are familiar with Stanford, and they have a long legacy of kind of making movies. You wouldn't have thought that. All that stuff happens down south in LA at Beverly Hills. But back in the day, in the late 1800s, Edward Muybridge, Leo Sampagino asked Edward Muybridge to film a horse. He wanted to see if this horse ever left, when it's at any one time when it's pushed off the ground, where the sort of kind of splayed outside, not underneath the horse, or the horse underneath the horse. Those are the long-standing questions. So to devise this type of film, they had devised a series of tripwires that this horse ran across. Basically, at the end of the tripwire was a camera, and as the horse ran across that tripwire, smash, took a picture. And so it was just a stroboscopic still view of a horse. But if you start to put motion to that, you get to see a horse running. It's only about 16 frames, but you will all see the horse's hooves are up underneath it as it's galloping when across the ground. Otherwise, it's running and sprinting. But to take a camera, if there's any avid photographers here, you have to have a shutter speed for your camera. In order to catch something moving, you need something that's faster or equally fast to catch it, to make it nice and clear in view, just like they did with this horse. So it's 1,000th of a second or millisecond was the ability at the time, that was the technology, to capture, open and close, and let the picture gather onto this film. So the shutter speed in this instance was just a millisecond. Very impressive for 1878 or something like that. So if you want to take pictures of atoms and molecules, milliseconds ain't going to work. Well, in the advent, cameras got better, tech got better. So we now need this. Now, if you picture this, if anyone's seen this on TV, of how these, how they do it, and did someone assassinate Kennedy with one magic bullet? They shoot these guns and these bullets are zooming through the air. You can see the bullet move on screen. So in order to do that, you know, a horse shoving down to the size of a bullet is much, much faster. If you shoot a bullet, it will beat the horse every time, right? It's gonna go move a lot faster. And so in order to capture this miraculous little film of a bullet ripping through an apple or a bullet ripping through a bottle of water, to see it clearly as it's going through everything, you need a millionth of a second shutter time. And that's 3 orders of magnitude difference, so it's thousands of a thousand. So that's really fast. A millionth of a second. But atoms and molecules move a lot faster than that. So we need a shutter speed to capture molecular movie on this. This is called a femtosecond. This is exactly what the Linac coherent light source can produce. We can produce X-ray pulses, like camera shutters, like shutter speeds on your camera, but in an X-ray regime. We're taking kind of like a big X-ray camera. And this is a millionth of a billionth of a second. So 15 orders of magnitude smaller. If there's 15 zeros in front of this one, it is an extremely, extremely small sliver of time. And but thankfully, we have the tech. Like I said, tech always gets better. And tech's going to get better here soon. On the last slide, we'll talk about it in a little bit. But to put this into perspective, if 1 femtosecond were 1 minute, that is to say that 1 minute is the age of the universe. It's pretty small sliver of time. It's fantastically small. So it's only 1 minute with 1 femtosecond, and 1 minute is the age of the universe. But not only are molecules move really fast, and they zoom all over the place, they also are extremely small. And so X-rays are on the wavelength, their oscillation or their period or their frequency is again, X-rays, we call it X-ray, but the wavelength is about an angstrom or so. And this angstrom in length scale is 10 billionths of a meter. It's 10 billionths of a meter. Okay? Do we even know? Like, so we put a scale to that. But so an angstrom, like I said, X-rays are unique probes of molecular structure, so the molecular structure would like something of a similar size to interrogate it, if not smaller. So in this case, this is the molecule that we looked at, our sulfide molecule, and from bond to bond, it's about 3 angstroms, 3 10 billionths of a meter. Well, that's tiny. How tiny? If you were to make that larger by 1,000,000 times, it would only be the size of the width of your hair. Your hair is about 100 microns in diameter. So if you go 1,000,000 times greater, so now you have one molecule is the width of your hair. So that still doesn't really put it in perspective. So